Thank you. We really appreciate you taking the time to celebrate and to reflect and to acknowledge a decade of the Centre for Inclusive Policy. It's really wonderful for us to be able to gather today. We are as geographically spread out as it is possible for a team to be. And while this means we have a great team and it's really crucial to us in being able to do that work that we do at CIP, it does add a logistical difficulty to gathering. I also just want to take this moment to say that we're so much more than our staff and our associates and our fellows. It takes a village, and we have a pretty large one. So if you've come from the disability rights movement, from an international organisation, from a university, if you've been a funder or even simply an enthusiastic reader of our newsletter, we really appreciate you being here. And in what has been a uniquely challenging time for people in human rights, being able to take time to collectively reflect on our achievements and look forward to the challenges ahead feels important. But we wanted to start with just a little video kind of looking back on the last 10 years. So I think that video is going to come up now. 31 distinct projects spread across the world.
When you consider all those efforts, you begin to understand the Center for Inclusive Policy's global reach.
From Uruguay to Vietnam, from South Africa to Fiji.
We draw upon and share knowledge across the world,
connecting global experiences to advance an inclusive agenda.
This is the Center for Inclusive Policy.
We're now going to get to the fireside chat portion of the day, and we will have our CEO and co-founder Daniel Mont in conversation with Tom Shakespeare, who is a professor of disability research at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. A lot of you will know Tom, but he is also here today in his capacity as a board member. And we do want to take this moment to just thank our board members, both past and present, for guiding and steering our work. So over to you, Dan and Tom.
Thank you, Maria, and it's a wonderful opportunity to be here and to see Dan and to ask Dan some questions. So, first of all, Dan, what gave you and Alex, who you co-founded Centre for Inclusive Policy with, what gave you the idea of starting it?
Well, I had been working at the World Bank, and this was just a few years after the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities came into being. And it became very clear to me that the disability rights movement was a very strong movement with a great deal of capability in terms of awareness raising, fighting for their rights, raising their issues, or in the words of the musical Hamilton, getting into the room where it happens. But once they got into the room where it happens, they didn't really know exactly what to say. So say, yes, there's a big gap in employment between people with and without disabilities. Well, what's the best policy? What's the best evidence for which policy would be most effective in the most cost-efficient way? And they really had some difficulties there. And on the flip side, you had development agencies with a wealth of experience on policy analysis and data and all this, but they knew very little about disability and inclusion. So we really felt there was a place for an organization in the middle there that could try to help connect those two groups, give them methodologies, the frameworks, some of the capacity building with the disability community to help them be more evidence-based in their advocacy, and at the same time provide some of those tools and to the development community to better understand disability and inclusion. And of course, we couldn't do everything, so we tried to pick the few areas where we felt there was we could really catalyze some action.
So how did you do that? I mean, you say that you couldn't do everything. There's such need. There's so many problems for disabled people in the world. How did you pick what you would contribute to?
Well, I think we picked what we contribute to the areas we knew the best. And one thing which was really apparent at the time was that there was resistance in the disability community to talking about social protection because they saw it from a very charity model perspective. Oh, we want employment, we want education. We're not here looking for disability cash handouts so we don't starve in the dark. And we said, well, no, social protection can be conceived of in a different way as a pro-participation, right? How can we have social protection policies that actually promote participation? And well, if we're going to do that, what do we need to know? What do we need? What kind of information do we have? And that's why we really honed in on this idea of extra costs, disability extra costs. Because people with disabilities face these extra costs in order to conduct their lives. Well, how do you measure them? How do you conceptualize them? How do you then incorporate them into social protection programs so that they can be pro-participation? And then other issues followed from that. And that's where we started. And that, of course, led us into thinking about independent living and community supports. And now recently the care agenda and trying to get a disability lens on that. And so sort of seeing what OPDs and what international agencies were working on, trying to figure out, well, where can we come in and sort of move that along?
So you started this new centre. What were the greatest challenges? I mean, you can't just start an international centre and find it easy, can you?
No. I mean, the first couple of years were pretty tough. We didn't want to be a consultancy firm. Right. So we, of course, at the beginning, we really did go after RFPs only in the areas that.
So what's RFP? Say that again.
A request for proposal.
Right.
So a UN agency, for example, might say, oh, we want to study on this, and they look for a consultant to do it. And so, of course, we would try to go for those contracts, but not any contract, the contracts in the areas where we wanted to grow. But in order to have that independence to really create our own agenda, we needed funding, and it was a development grant from OSF that really enabled us to transition from being a quasi-consulting firm to becoming our own organization with our own agenda and being able to try to proactively do things that we thought would be helpful moving forward.
So what lessons have stayed with you from, as it were, the early days?
Well, I think it really was trying to best ascertain what were the blocks from a methodological research point of view, right? Or what were the pieces of information? What were the methodologies that would help move along the agenda of the OPDs themselves, right? What are their priorities, right? We're not imposing our priorities on them, right? We're trying to see, what are they trying to do? Where can we step in? And the same thing with the development agencies. We would talk to them and they would say, oh, it would be great to do this, but we have no idea how. Or, gee, you're saying it's important, but prove it to us, and say, okay, well, this is what's needed in order to move things. So we kind of think of ourselves as we're a small organization, but we like to think of ourselves as a catalyst to action.
So here we are in 2025. Thankfully, Centre for Inclusive Policy has been around for some time now. What's different? Do you change?
Well, I think we need to try to be thinking ahead in terms of what are the next policy areas where we want to develop. We're still working, of course, in social protection and independent living and just data, trying to get better data. But we want to say, okay, moving forward, where are some of the other areas that really seem to be sticking points? So humanitarian assistance is actually a big issue now, and people are saying, well, how do we incorporate disability into that? And so, well, we don't have a lot of experience in humanitarian work, but we have a lot of experience in data. So we say, okay, well, maybe this is where we can enter into the picture, try to help people figure out how to collect the appropriate data, and in the process, learn about humanitarian issues and where things are needed, and try to provide, our comparative advantage, the little pieces of analysis or evidence that can help others who are working on this move themselves along.
I think one of the strongest things as I look at CIP is the fellows. Could you say a little bit about... Sorry, I'm coughing. Can you say a little bit about how you find the fellows and the difference you make Sorry. Can you say a little bit about how you find the fellows and the difference you make to them by your support?
Well, a big thing that we want to do is increase the capacity of the disability community to do policy analysis. And we want to find sort of early to mid-career people with disabilities from the Global South. And we want them to come with their projects, their priorities. We're not saying, hey, we want someone to do X. We say, okay, you're a early career person with a disability in the Global South. You know the issues in your country. You know what would be valuable to moving the policy agenda in your country. We want to help you not only do your project, but build your capacity so you can become a policy analyst. You can go after these RFPs. You can develop your own research proposals. You can help the disability community in your country develop evidence-based advocacy. And we put out this call, and we get hundreds of people. And I wish we could hire dozens of them. We only can get a few a year, 2 to 4 a year. And they're really wonderful people. And we come in and we try to not only have them do their project and help them learn. And then once they're done being fellows, we have a continuing education project. So, so they can keep coming in, and we try to say, once your fellowship is over, it's not the end of your relationship with CIP. We want to develop this community, connect them to the broader community. Some of them, they're not connected to other disability researchers and policy analysts around the world. And I think it's a big part of our trying to help the sector have the capacity to reach their goals. And I'm very proud of the fellowship program. My only problem with it is I wish we could have so many more of them.
Well, I think the sector, thanks to you, because the Centre for Inclusive Policy has done so much for disability policy worldwide. And it's wonderful to join you in celebrating this anniversary. And I think you'll be around for as long as you want, because we will always want you. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Tom.
We're now going to go into kind of a section of short inputs from some of our partners and some of our community. So we're going to start with one of our kind of key partners and associates. We're going to hear from Gopal Mitra, who is the Global Lead of Disability and Development at UNICEF. UNICEF have been a key partner in some really meaningful work, and we really appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with them on some key issues impacting children and young people with disabilities.
Hello, everyone. It is a true honor for me to join you in celebrating the 10th anniversary of the Center for Inclusive Policy, or CIP, as we know in short. On behalf of UNICEF, I want to express my warmest congratulations to the entire CIP team and to all those who have contributed to the remarkable journey of CIP over the last 10 years. For 10 years, CIP has been a trusted partner of UNICEF and a source of technical excellence on disability inclusion. Together, CIP and UNICEF have worked to build the evidence, the tools and the guidance that are so critical for us to fulfill our commitments to children with disabilities. Whether it is strengthening care and support systems for children with disabilities, promoting disability inclusive financing, or measuring the cost of disability, the contribution of CIP has been significant. We all know that children with disabilities face so many barriers in accessing health, education, social protection, and participating in the community. But we also know that children with disabilities bring incredible strength, resilience, and leadership when given a chance to thrive. Partnership with organizations like CIP enable us to break outdated assumptions, build evidence, and ensure that children with disabilities are seen, heard, and included. Looking ahead, there are significant challenges, but the opportunities are also significant. Our partnership with CIP has enabled us to ensure that our efforts are aligned with the CRPD, grounded in rights, and guided by evidence. So as we mark this milestone of 10 years, I would like to thank each and every member of CIP for your unwavering commitment to disability inclusion, for your passion, for your technical expertise, and the rigor that you bring to your work. Congratulations on 10 years of partnership and excellence. And I hope to work together in the coming decade to ensure inclusion is a reality for millions more children with disabilities. Thank you.
And thank you for those kind words, Gopal. For our next speaker, I want to introduce someone whose work can really make us think differently about how inclusion happens, not just what it looks like, but the nuts and the bolts of what inclusion means. Budget analysis can really show us the whole picture of where inclusion stands in government priorities. So it is a really great pleasure to introduce a colleague who is as kind as she is formidable, former CIP Fellow, our budget analysis lead, Senior Associate Meenakshi Balasubramanian. Over to you, Meenakshi.
Thank you so much. It's been a privilege to collaborate with individuals from diverse backgrounds who bring expertise and shared commitment to advancing the rights of persons with disabilities. My role at CIP focuses on the data segment of our work, particularly the budget analysis, using the Convention for the Rights of Persons with Disabilities as a guiding framework. We support capacity building of organizations of persons with disabilities across countries, enabling them to conduct national level budget analysis for effective advocacy. This includes strengthening their ability to contribute to evidence-based reforms in policies and programs, as well as developing accessible budget data visualizations. As an organization, our goal is to ensure budget analysis expertise within OPDs globally, facilitating them to monitor CRPD implementation and contribute to a growing repository of budget data for analysis and for international advocacy. In our budget work, but in all our endeavors, we try to give stakeholders the tools and information they need to build a more inclusive world. Looking ahead, we envision establishing a global budget coalition dedicated to reforming policies and programs, ensuring that persons with disabilities can fully enjoy all human rights and fundamental freedoms on an equal basis with others. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Meenakshi. None of our work is possible without our funders and those who support CIP in our work. And we're particularly lucky to have a lot of funders who not only support our work, but share our mission for a truly inclusive future. And I can see a couple of people on the Zoom, but we're particularly lucky to have Lesley Carson from the Wellspring Philanthropic Fund, who's joining us here today to give a donor perspective. And we were really glad when she said she was willing to kind of share that perspective. So over to you, Lesley. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for including me. It's great to see everyone, and I'm hearing a lot of words that start to sound similar across our remarks about rigor and agenda setting, and you'll hear more from me. But I've been with Wellspring, which is a private funding institution, since the earliest days of exploring and dreaming about what might be possible in disability rights under the leadership of John Taylor and Catherine Townsend. And over the years, I've had the privilege of watching the work and, fortunately, the resources grow, first under Catherine's leadership and later under the leadership of Miroslava Tatarin, and always as part of this broader human rights grant-making program. And there's no question that funding work to advance disability rights has been both the bread and butter and really kind of an innovation hub for this broader global human rights grant-making strategy at Wellspring. So as a funder, we're in a kind of unique vantage point, looking at the chessboard of collective action to advance a movement and its goals. We always talk about the ecosystem. It's a word we throw around a lot, but we're trying to identify the actors who mobilize communities, litigate cases, advocate in key spaces like the UN or national government spaces and agencies, or deliver services and all the other range of specializations of field actors. So within that, one of the most important things we do is identify those critical field anchors, the organizations that really serve as kind of pillars of the entire field, and provide this range of functions like rigorous research, setting agendas, bridging communities and policymakers, helping secure those practical policy wins and other things. And since we began funding CIP, we realized that they really have become exactly that anchor that this field and this movement need. We've steadily increased investments in CIP and seen really important kind of return, to use that investor language, on those bets. And at core, we really see CIP as this trusted partner, both a thought partner and an organization that delivers. So we kind of think of CIP as the think and do tank, bringing together advocates, decision makers, and researchers to improve policies and systems. We've been impressed with your global perspective, your comparative analysis, and evidence-based policy guidance that really position the organization in this anchor role for both governments and the disability movement. And one example of that is that even when Wellspring staff, our human rights team, faced some pretty high pressure moments to both demonstrate the impact of our grant making in advancing disability rights, and also to identify where some promising opportunities in policy space to make real advancements were, we turned again and again to CIP, to its research, to its analysis, its field knowledge, and credibility. So I think, as was mentioned at the beginning of this call, we all know we're in a real moment for human rights, for the work and the funding. And it's not a cliche to say that CIP's leadership and role is more important than ever. It's a platform for some of the world's top thinkers and researchers on disability rights. Its evidence is so important in a moment where we're in this strange kind of inflection where credible evidence seems sort of elusive and challenged, yet it's kind of more important than ever to have that rigor. So, I hope all the funders in this space continue to support the organization. Wellspring is sunsetting. I hope that all the agencies and governments and organizations on this call continue to partner with CIP. And we know you all are poised to continue to do great things. So congratulations and thanks to everyone. We're deeply, deeply grateful for the partnership.
Thank you, Lesley. That was incredibly lovely. And I agree that it shouldn't be, but sometimes really good evidence is actually a radical contribution. And I feel really privileged that we get to do this kind of work at CIP. We're now going to take a moment to focus on one of those really, one of those spaces that brings incredible researchers into the CIP space, our fellows. There isn't a lot of pathways to doing this kind of work, in particular for people with disabilities from the larger world. And I know myself, when I was a young person, trying to be a disabled person in kind of that policy analysis space and in that legal space. And as someone who really wanted to serve kind of the community in this way, there wasn't a clear way to get there. But we get the most incredible people joining CIP through our fellowship program, and we get to support them on really groundbreaking and sometimes quite transformative projects over the course of a year, which is a privilege. We have just welcomed a whole new class of fellows starting last month. Kamu, who's working on data. Anna is looking at community supports. Umesh is doing some really cool stuff on climate change. And it's a real pleasure to get to work with people over the year of their fellowship, but also seeing what happens next, seeing where our fellows go, how they carry the ideas and learnings and the enthusiasm that they all really embody in spades with them into their careers and into their future work. So I'm now going to hand over to one of CIP's former fellows, Alimata Karimu, who's been doing really transformative work, both in her fellowship and following it. So Alimata, it'll be great to hear from you now.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My name is Alimata Abdul Karimu from Ghana, a recent fellow with CIP, and now a master's student at Flinders University, Australia. I applied to the fellowship program in 2021 because of its strong emphasis on research-driven policy, particularly the critical analysis of social policy frameworks supporting the rights of persons with disabilities. Disability representation in policy remains largely medicalized, and even when human rights frameworks are adapted, implementation gaps persist. The fellowship offered me a vital platform to interrogate the gaps. Under the guidance of Dan and Zach, my project examined Ghana's District Assembly's Common Fund for Persons with Disabilities. A key contribution was tracing the fund's origin, an area notably absent in existing literature then. The timing was strategic, coinciding with recent revisions that changed how fund beneficiaries accessed support, enabling a responsive and policy-relevant analysis. Our findings revealed that the 2018 transition in disbursement practices from cash-based assistance to in-kind support was prompted by related fund misuse and follow-up requests. However, in relation to the in-kind support practice, the items provided were often of poor quality and lacked durability. Procurement costs were routinely inflated, with assemblies purchasing equipment at up to twice or more the market rate, thereby reducing beneficiary coverage. In addition, some items also failed to meet beneficiary accessibility requirements due to the exclusion of social welfare officers from the procurement process. This disconnect between assessment and acquisition led to equipment mismatches and broader implementation challenges, among many others. My engagement with CIP and exposure to global disability policy discourse deepened my understanding of inclusive policy design and strategic implementation. This positioned me to lead the rollout of the United Nations Disability Inclusion Strategy within the United Nations country team in Ghana immediately after my fellowship. At inception, only 3 of 14 disability scorecard indicators were met or nearing compliance. By December 2024, all 14 indicators had reached minimum compliance, demonstrating the impact of embedding disability expertise in institutional processes. Looking ahead, I remain committed to advancing inclusive policy systems through rigorous research and analysis. Thank you and happy anniversary, CIP. Thank you.
Thank you, Alimata. And it was really lovely to hear about your experience, but also just reflect on the journey that you've been on, both with CIP and afterwards. And we're really grateful to have you here today. So we are now moving to the participation part of the event. And we're going to be kind of moving from looking to the past to looking forward and thinking about maybe the next 10 years. So we're going to be doing a Mentimeter activity. For those of you who haven't used Mentimeter before, it's you can access the link from the chat there. There's 2 different ways that you can access it. You can click on the link, or you can go to the menti.com and enter the code that's in the chat. If this Mentimeter works for a lot of people, if it's not accessible for you, we're going to be answering a question, and you can simply type the question into the chat, and Maria Antonella will from CIP will help move that to the Mentimeter, so it will be included with everyone else's answers. There's a couple of things to just note on it. If you are putting in a word, it uses space to separate words. So make sure, like if you're talking about like social protection, to use a hyphen, or it will separate your answers. But I suppose what we want to talk about for the next while is what are the biggest challenges for the field. And I think Dan's going to come on, and maybe we're going to think about some of those challenges together. Dan?
Hi, Maria. Yes, thanks. Yeah, so we've had 10 years, but we hopefully have a lot more years to go. And so we're trying to think about what are our next steps? Where are we going next within the areas that are included in our strategic goals? And as I talked about with Tom, social protection was a big area, trying to estimate and come up with tools that help people identify the extra costs of living with a disability. But once you identify those costs and how they might structure a program, then we have to think about how do we assess the support needs of people with disabilities, right? And how can we do that in different countries that have very different resource levels, very different levels of technical capacity to undertake those assessments. So a big part of what we're doing now is trying to help develop those assessment tools and to work with governments and organizations of people with disabilities to develop the administrative mechanisms to identify the supports that people need and to be able to then design the programs that can actually deliver those supports. So that's really the next stage of our social protection work. And this is very much related to the work that you lead, Maria, on community supports and independent living. So maybe you should talk some about that.
And I think we've been working on some work around the gender guidelines and getting ready for the committee's introduction of the gender guidelines. And we've really been thinking about the social protection and community supports element in tandem, because they are really just kind of key enablers in terms of people actually living the lives that they want to live and living the lives that they want to live, and living good lives. And we've been thinking a lot, around what community supports are actually necessary. And a lot of the time it comes into like conversations about like one or two areas of life, but thinking as community supports is kind of necessary for all areas of life. And not just we, it's necessary for education, it's necessary for employment, it's necessary just for being part of the community. But also thinking about the different kinds of support that people need, because it's not just about the support to do the basics of getting out of bed and being up and part of the world is crucial, but also thinking about maybe things like supported decision making, which can often get lost in narratives around support, that actually needs to really be embedded into those everyday supports that people have to live their lives. We talk a lot about the care agenda. And there's a huge amount moving in that space. And we've been really lucky to get to work on some really kind of interesting and necessary pieces around the care agenda. But and that's a really important thing in terms of ensuring that people with disabilities and the disability rights agenda isn't lost within that. But also the care agenda fundamentally asks, like, what do we want communities and societies to look like, and including disability support as a key platform to that, and as something that's kind of not a nice to have or not an addition, but actually a core part of what that systems transformation looks like, has the potential to be just really transformative. So thinking about that as we move forward, not just with our partners in the disability movement, but also kind of across social movements, looking to really create kind of that inclusive future. But I mean, our role is the evidence generation for the most part, and we're we're really lucky to do that.
Yeah, and another big part of what we do, another one of our main areas, is in data, disability data, and we've done a lot trying to help countries collect better survey and census data on people with disabilities and the situation in their lives. And we're continuing to do that. Kamal, one of this year's fellows, is actually looking at some implementation issues with Washington Group Disability Questions in his country, in Kenya. And Meenakshi mentioned, all the work we're doing with budget data in that area, and we're trying to expand the data area as well into administrative systems, the disability assessments for support that I was just talking about, educational management information systems. We're doing some work in West Africa, trying to help that, and then also to think more broadly about disability management information systems, harmonizing the disability data that's collected in surveys and administrative data and citizen-generated data, for that matter, to try to get an interconnected, holistic look at the situation of people with disabilities, so that we're not just sort of identifying problems, but we're actually collecting the data that can help in the development, implementation, and monitoring of programs to address those problems. We're always looking to expand data. I mentioned humanitarian, and Maria, maybe you want to talk about that and some other issues that we're hopefully CIP will be moving into.
Yeah, and I think this is something that, and we've all kind of alluded to the uncertain nature of the world right now at different points over our call this morning, and we are in what is effectively kind of slight perma-crisis is the word that I keep using a lot, but there is really significant instability, both politically, but also in terms of climate, increasing humanitarian crisis. Not to be like forward-looking, but here is some of the scary things that we're kind of looking into as a global community, and I think a lot of the time when people talk about inclusive policy, or when people talk about, or states in particular talk about disability inclusion and what that looks like, it's like it's the nice to have. It's not a core piece of something. It's, if things are going well, then we can maybe have some kind of community support, or maybe then we collect disability data, or maybe then we do social protection. But actually recognizing that, like, we need to be engaging and developing systems that we need to and creating systems that are resilient and actually able to withstand the challenges that happen in that space. And I know we've been talking a lot about like how do we do disability data in humanitarian settings, and actually making sure that disabled people aren't lost in those in crises. But beyond that, also making sure that the systems that we have, the systems that are built, the systems that are crucial to people with disabilities living like lives as part of the community don't completely crumble when crises occur. And I think that's a challenge for right across the kind of disability policy globe. I think something else that I'm thinking about a lot, and I think I saw someone talking about like the inclusion of like young people with disabilities in development programs in the chat, is making sure that it's not just a certain group of persons with disabilities that benefits from policy interventions or benefits from systems being developed, that we have systems that work from kind of when you're very young, but also including when you're an older person, that they're gender sensitive, that they're able to kind of meet that whole community and meet the diversity of the disability community, both in terms of diversity of types of disability, but also recognizing that we are everywhere, and every group of people has disabled people. So that's just something that I think we really need to think of both now, but moving forward, and to continue to incorporate those lenses in our work.
And I like to think of us as being both proactive and reactive. Reactive in the sense that we're trying to get from the disability community what are the key issues that are arising that are important, and proactive in the sense of trying to take action to develop new things that can help meet those. And so we asked all of you to say what you think are the biggest challenges. And hopefully that Mentimeter worked, and we'll be able to see. I'll put on my assistive technology right here so I can see what you said. Well, yeah, funding, that's a big one. I wish that we were in a position to win the lottery and provide that, but that is a big challenge. And social protection and climate change really seem to be coming up, and disability certification. And that's related to what I was saying before in terms of we want to provide social protection services to people, but at the same time, we have to be able to determine who is going to get them and what they're going to get. And there's a tension. There's a tension between the governments who are concerned about fraud and budgets, and the disability community, which is concerned about rights and making sure people's needs are met. And we have to be able to balance those things. I see climate change is coming up big, but there's so many things for people who can see it. I can't read all of the things people are saying, but there's isolation, care and supports, care agenda coming up again, disconnection with the elderly. There's a lot having to do with climate change, actually. No champions in government, CRPD implementation. We have a lot of work to do, and as those of you who are out there, we hope to be able to communicate with you, work with you, and data is coming up big. That's one of my favorite things. It's not the sexiest topic, but it's super important. Without data, we can't really know how to operate and how to operate well. So I appreciate everyone putting that up. And so now I think I'd like to close with we put together a collage of not everybody who has worked with CIP, but on the screen right now we see many people. Some of them are former fellows, staff, board members, funders, consultants. It goes way beyond the however many people that were up here, but we just wanted to show those faces and to thank them all, to thank all of you for your support, for your challenging us when on things and for working with us and collaborating with us. And we hope that we can continue providing a valuable service in addition to the cause for inclusion and disability rights around the world. So thanks for coming today, and hope to be connecting with you all at some point in the future.
Thanks, everyone.